Welcome to the Picky Girl Travels podcast, the show for Black women who want more out of life and to live it as they see fit. The message here is all about defying convention, embracing adventure, and regretting absolutely nothing. I'm your host, Adelia Borchade of PickyGirlTravelsTheWorld.com. What does it look like to live life on your terms? Well, that depends. For my guest this week, it means leaving a highly lucrative career to pursue a dream of baking alcohol-infused sweet treats. I'm excited for y'all to hear my interview with Dawn Belle of Delights by Dawn. I hope her story reminds you that it is never too late to go after your dreams. You have not taken what looks like a very traditional path, so that's why I wanted to have you on the show. So
okay, absolutely.
I did a little Googling, a little research, and I mean, I knew you were a lawyer, but I didn't really understand that you were like a prosecutor, criminal attorney. I mean, like for real lawyer. And so, anybody looking at that part of your life would say, well, yeah, because like you went to Spelman, like you did the things you were supposed to do.
Right.
And then you, or at least on the side, you were doing your baking. Mm-hmm. So can you talk to me a little bit about like, where did that come from? Was baking something you always did, or was that like a stress relief thing?
Yeah. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I did all the traditional, this is what you should do. And this is kind of like, okay, I've always been a creative, but don't know where, I think I kind of know where I got it from, but I've always been a creative, but it was always kind of more suppressed because you need to kind of do the practical things. So yes, did the whole college, did the law school. You're correct, was a prosecutor for years, then did defense work, and then did appellate work, and then I've taught it. But I kind of knew, and I've been in the legal field now 25 maybe years. 1995, I'm not good with numbers, is when I got barred and I started practicing. But kind of early on, 10 years in, I kind of knew it's not something that I wanted to do until the day I died. I have always baked and I cook. I learned it from my mom. God rest her soul. She was a fabulous cook and she was a great baker, self-taught. My family is actually from Belize, which is not far from Mexico, right there. So culturally, I grew up more with a mixture of Caribbean and Latin food, dance, all that kind of stuff. And our what's the word I'm looking for? I'm at a loss for words, but our culture, how we were raised. So I've always done the baking, always loved it. And even when I was deep in early on and I was yes, I'm a lawyer and prosecutor, I still loved to bake and I loved to feed people. So I always did it. But early on, I used to say, I envision myself being having my own storefront with my baked goods. I also paint. I mean, I remember telling this to some of my friends, my art will be on the wall. I'm going to have long curly flowing hair, wearing a flowy dress, some other things, which I'm not going to say. And I'm like, I'm pretty much there. So I did. And then in like 2013, 14, I just really was just not happy doing the law. And my mom passed in 2006. And it was after she passed, it was kind of like an awakening. It wasn't that I was living my life for her, but they always say sometimes it's the tragic things that happen in life that make you look more into yourself or make you kind of like take a look at your life. And for some reason, that was the time when I started thinking, I'm really not happy. And that was my I don't really give a fuck what anybody says moment, excuse my French, because it was like, I'm not going to continue to do something that I'm really not that happy doing. And, you know, I guilt tripped myself. Oh, well, you went to school for so many years and da 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 da. And then I was like, so what? You know, and family that would say stuff to me. And I'm very opinionated. Family members that would be like, well, what? I'm like, well, did you pay any money? Did you give me any money towards? So why the hell are you worried about what I'm going to do? You didn't pay for any tuition. I put myself through school. I came from a very, very, very middle class family. My mom and dad, you know, just regular middle class. So I basically put myself through college and law school. And so that's when I kind of said, okay, this is kind of what I envision. And I started taking the baking business more seriously. And I started the website and I said, well, you know, maybe I'll start just kind of selling. And it was still kind of selling on the side for a long time. And then, you know, I created the brand with the alcohol infused. And, you know, how it really started is I was an avid Falcons fan at the time, tailgated a lot. And I started off making the rum cake. You know, my mom made infused cake. So the rum cake was like the OG of everything. And I just started experimenting and took it out to tailgates. And folks were like, oh my God, you should try to get this in the dome. And I didn't think about that. And I was like, why not? And that's kind of how it snowballed. I actually ended up getting into the dome, selling it during the Falcons game. I was with them for like 3 years, the Hawks. So I was actually like the first company ever to sell alcohol infused cupcakes in a professional sports stadium, like ever. And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, you know what? I love my baking. It's like the time when I can zone out and I'm just like, it's almost like meditating. It's something that I love to do. So I didn't really kind of think of it in that aspect. And it just kind of, you know, snowballed from there. Things have changed, of course, COVID and everything before that. So even my business model, even my thought process on the business and, you know, even my life, I went back into law a little bit to teach. I love teaching. So to train, I did do that back in 2018. But I even rebranded my law practice to mesh with the baking. So I became a consultant and saw the need for a lot of bakers that don't know the rules, the regulations. So I started doing like webinar classes. So I still love the law in that aspect because I was still dealing with what I love, which was the baking world. So I've transformed a couple of times over these past few years.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the constant, you know, you're never too old, you're never too late. It's just the constant realization of what makes you happy and just being introspective and just kind of really sitting down in peace, in quietness, not looking at social media and seeing what other people are doing, knowing what really makes you happy, and then trying to take whatever steps you can to get as close to that as possible. And that's kind of how I am at this point.
Now, I have a theory, so I'm curious. When you said like after your mom had died and you had kind of gotten more introspective and you were like, I'm not happy living my life this way. Were you about 40 at that time?
Yes. Let me think, because I'm 51 now. So my mom, I was a little younger than that. I may have been like late 30s, about to be in my 40s. So yeah, it was definitely closer to the 40s. So I think I was in late 30s. If I was in my 40s, like it was just hitting it. Yeah.
That's my theory. There is something magical that happens when you turn 40 and you have some clarity about the world, about your life, about yourself that you just don't have earlier in life, unfortunately, because I've said repeatedly, if I was who I was at 40, if I had been that chick 15, 20 years earlier.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's the same. If I knew then what I know now, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think you know, your 20s, you don't know anything. You're still a kid. I don't care what anybody says. You're still a kid. You don't even know yourself yet. I think in your 30s, you're starting to get a little bit more serious in life. And unfortunately, I think the way we're programmed is that now when you're in your 30s, you're becoming a little bit more serious, but now you're starting to think, okay, this is what society says I should be, where I should be, which is why a lot of women stress out, because they think that they should be married with 2 children, a dog, a house, a picket fence, a great husband. And so your 30s, you're trying to figure it out still, but you're still being led by someone else's definition of happiness and success. And you're right. I think 40 was the magical number for me, because even if it was like late 30s when I started figuring this out, it was the 40s. I just kind of like, forget it. I'm going to do what I want to do. And the 40s, I started doing more meditating, started reading more books on, you know, how to quiet the noise of everybody else and everything else, and really look into yourself and really be honest with yourself in regards to what makes you happy. Not what other people say should make you happy or should be success, but for you, what is success? And that's where it really, in the 40s, was the definite time when I figured out who I was and what really made me happy to do things for me and not what other people expected of me. Yeah.
No, you said it very much. I think the 30s are for women especially, we very much get caught up because greater American society, basically a woman is useless after she's about 35. So right. There's all of this pressure of, have I achieved these milestones? Am I living the quote unquote American dream and all of that? And that may not be what, because there are people who, you know, checking all those boxes and doing all those things, that is happiness right. for them. But there are, I think, a lot of us for whom that is not what really matters. That is not what really makes us happy. And being okay with deviating from the norm, you know, that takes time to get there.
I totally agree with you. I to be honest, I think a lot of people that are following those check boxes are not happy. I think it's a fake happy. They're saying they're happy, but and here's the bad part. There's still a lot of people, and I shouldn't say it's a bad part because it just takes life experiences and everybody has different life experiences, but you have people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, some who never really know what makes them happy or never really admit as to what really makes them happy. So you have people that go through life that the happy that they say they are is really a superficial, and they have not really delved into themselves to know for sure, to say, this is what makes me happy unapologetically. I still think that there are a lot of people who do not know what really makes them happy, and they still think that checking off these check boxes is success and happiness. And it's not. I know a lot of people that have a lot of check marks. And I know in having conversations with them, and even with them having conversations with me and me doing what I'm doing, they're like, oh, I wish. So what does that say?
There was something you said before about not doing things you didn't want to do. And I have said this recently. I have been saying this for the last 6 years. Like, I no longer do things that I'm not 100% into. Like, right. If it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Right. That part of my life is over. But we have been conditioned so much that you're just supposed to, you know, put your head down right. and plow through it. It's okay if you're not happy right now. It'll be better later, that sort of thing. And so when you say, you know, people look at how you're living your life now and they're like, oh, I wish I could do that. You could. You
right.
could.
You could, but you have to And I do read a lot of books. Like I've read a lot of books. I love Eckhart Tolle because I read a couple of his books that made me learn how to differentiate. And this is what we don't understand. And a lot of people live by: my ego from my true self. And a lot of times we act and it's based upon our ego, but you don't even know that that's what you're doing. And until you can realize and be able to then differentiate the difference and say, okay, like I literally have a conversation with myself. Okay, is this the ego talking? Like, how do I physically really feel? Something as simple as, okay, I may be in bed and my friends are like, come on, go out, da 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 da. And you're like, oh, I kind of really don't want to. But then you're kind of like, well, maybe I should. Well, I actually have to ask myself, when I think about going out, how does that make me feel?
Yes, I know exactly
like,
what you're talking about.
I do. Really want to get dressed. That's the ego trying to goad you to do something you really don't want to do. If I feel more content when I think about getting in my bed and putting on Netflix, then that's where my true happiness is. And that's what I have to listen to. And I think a lot of people don't know yet how to differentiate the ego from the true self. And I think once people do, and they start saying, okay, hold up, before they act, is this the ego? Or is this really me? Then I think more people will do more things that are closer to their happiness spot than not.
Yes, no, I will find myself, because this is all a work in progress.
Yeah,
there is no, there is no final arrival point. And I'll be like, I'll have to talk to myself and be like, but what are you really feeling? And where is that coming from? Is that because you don't want to do that? Okay, then we need to stop doing this right now. Like whether, like you said, whether it's going out, whether it is taking on a project.
I am kind of going through that a little bit here. I mean, I'm in Spain right now, but I was in, I don't know if you saw, I was in pastry school for 3 months in France. So during COVID, I was doing my business still, which I did pretty decent. I did not lose money. I didn't make as much as I would have, but thank God I didn't lose money. And I was very busy during COVID. And I was still doing remotely from home the day job that I had, which I was training attorneys in a government office. And something just hit me to say, well, I'd always said, like 2 years ago, I said, I came to Paris, I did some workshops, totally fell in love with France. And I said, I'm going to come back. I want to one day get a certificate. Didn't say when, didn't say how, didn't put a time frame on it. I just threw it out there and said that. And something hit me during COVID and I said, I'm going to go. And I started looking up. And I knew that the job that I was at, my boss would be flexible because when I first went to him, I said, the number one priority is still my business. And he understood that. And I came here and I just finished it like a week ago. That's why I'm here in Spain. I was here for 3 months. And I'm not going back until September because I'm going to go take some formal French lessons. But I have been going back and forth with, okay, well, there were some things that I thought I wanted to do. And I'm like, oh my God, but like, I don't even really kind of want to do that, And then I'm like, but, maybe I should do it to like, put some money back that I've used. But the thought of it is like, and I'm like, what are you doing? If the thought of it, even though you have a practical, rational reason for wanting to, if the thought of it is making you like want to gag, what the hell why are you even thinking about it? And I think and I think what happens is a lot of people go through that, but they don't follow it through. They go through that and they still end up doing what they know they don't want to do because they come up with some rational explanation.
It's practical. It makes sense on paper. Like there's lots of practical, rational reasons why you should do the thing. Yeah. But we have been so conditioned to ignore what I feel are like our built-in, alarm sense. And so we downplay the voice in the back of our head, how you feel like, every time I think about this, my stomach hurts a little bit. That's your body trying to tell you.
It is.
You don't need to be doing that.
Thank you. And I don't know why I can never remember the name. I always have a brain fart, but it was a thin little book. I've read it like 5 times. Every time I need to rejuvenate by Eckhart Tolle. Is it the happiness? It's something like the happiness prescription. The 7 something steps to the happiness prescription. And in there, it talks about that. It talks about listening to your body. If your stomach turns into knots at the thought of talking to someone or doing something, that's your body saying it doesn't bring you joy. It doesn't make you happy. You don't need to deal with it. And, we call it women intuition. It is intuition, but everybody has it. But I think we, again, like you said, we're so programmed that we ignore our own body feels and we don't listen to it. Because how many times have people said they didn't do something, that they had some kind of body feel or intuition, and the first thing you say is, I should have followed my first mind. I should have followed my intuition.
Every time.
I no longer ignore that. I don't ignore it anymore. I don't. Same. I don't. It's just, life is too short. And for however much longer I'm going to be here, I'm going to try to be as close to happy most of the time. We know this is not a perfect world, as possible, and unapologetically.
I love it. Yeah. See, and that's why I knew I needed to talk to you.
And not only that, the whole comfort zone, comfort box thing. Oh my God. One of my best friends gave me a book before I left, and I started reading it. Dang it. I wish it was somewhere I could get up really quick and get it, because I brought it. But it's not The Dream Giver. I will have to get that name to you, because that's another book. That particular book is a great book for people to read, because that particular book talks about everyone has a big dream. You don't do it, but what it really talks about is stepping out of the comfort zone, which we don't do, that box. And it talks about people who try to prevent you, some intentionally, some not intentionally, from stepping out of the comfort zone you want to step out of, because they are comfortable with you being in their box that they have for you. And I will honestly say this, it is a shame, but when I started my baking business and I started moving in a different direction than my law practice, I lost a couple of friends I had had for over 30 years, because I saw such a difference in how they were when I stepped out of that. Oh, they were great with me being a lawyer. They were fine with me being in that box. When I stepped out of that box and I started doing these other things, I started seeing some behavior that I was like, what the hell? How did I not notice that before? And honestly, I cut them off. I'm no longer friends with them, because I'm not going to keep toxic people or people who I feel maybe, behind the scenes envy. I don't need that negative vibe in my positive aura. And I really do live by that. I don't care if it's family. I don't care if it's someone I've known for 40 years. If the vibe is toxic and it messes with my aura, I got to let it go.
You've really said something there, because of the work that I do, I'm in a lot of spaces online with people who are looking to move abroad and people who have faced pushback from family, friends, people like that. And what you said is exactly it. It's about, you're making this big change in your life. That changes their box, and they don't like that. And sometimes I think they may not even be conscious of it, but like you said, you were fine when you were a lawyer, but you kind of going out and doing this, what some people consider to be this wild and crazy thing, walking away from a successful career, like that then maybe makes them have to question some choices of their own, and they're not comfortable with that. And again, it may all be, be subconscious that's making them uncomfortable, and they're not even aware of it. But no, you said something right there. You really did.
I mean, it is. And the other thing too is with that whole comfort zone, because when I was coming over here, I had a couple of friends, and they're still friends because I had to kind of check them. is that people will project because they're afraid to do it or they won't ever do it. They project their fears onto you and question you based on their fears. And I had to tell a couple of people, and I had to say, look, if I'm doing this, I'm all good. I don't need you saying, well, what about you're not making any income? What about your bills? What if I'm not worried about that? Then I don't need you to, that's your fear. It's not my fear. So check that at the door. And if they did, then cool. And if they didn't, then, you know, but yeah. That's a lot of time. It's they think of what you're doing and they think of what fears they would have. And they project that or think that it should be the same fears that you should have, if any fears at all. Because I did have a couple of them like, well, what about the business? And what about, and I'm like, what about it? It's my business. If my customers appreciate me, they'll understand. And yeah, I shut the business down for 6 months. And my clientele, my customers, my true tribe, they're excited for me. They're happy. They've been following along on my stories on the journey back, which that's kind of another story I'm trying to keep on the wraps. But, you know, I'm over here doing research in France because I want to live in France. And I'm going to live in France. And it's not 5-10 years down the line. It's sooner than a lot of people think because I'm happy here. I'm more content. And I have to do what makes me happy. You know, I get, you know, the United States, I'm just constantly wound up and constantly that hustle, that grind, that anxiety. And I don't have anxiety, but with all the politics and all the foolishness going on over there, I mean, I'm just like, you know, I just can't. If COVID didn't teach anybody anything, you're not promised tomorrow. And I may not be here tomorrow. So when people are sitting there, and I do this now saying, oh, when I retire, when you retire, you may not be able to move around the way you move around now. So why are you going to wait till you're 65 to go travel? You may not even be able to travel if you're around. I hate to say it like that.
But that's the system. The system has conditioned us to put off our happiness, to put off our dreams until some magical time later when there's, and like you said, if you didn't learn anything else from the last 2 years, it should be nothing is promised. Life is short.
Yep.
Now, so now this program that you did in France, how did that come about? Like, were you actively seeking a pastry program, or was it like, I know I want to do something, I don't know?
No, I actively was seeking a pastry program. And I knew I wanted to come to the southern part of France because people had told me before, you definitely got to go to the southern part. And I already knew, whether it was France before or wherever, that in my latter years, like I used to say, I need to be near the beach. The water is calming for me. I go there, I meditate. It's really the one place I can go and literally be physically present and still not think about anything in the past. I think about anything in the future. So I knew I needed to be close to it. So of course, southern France, I was like, okay, new place, near water. So I actively researched and started to look for pastry programs in the southern part of France, and there are not a lot of them. And then I happened to get, that's the lawyer skills in me, researched, and I found the school, Gastronomicon, that I went to. And when I tell you, it's one of the best decisions in my life that I've ever made. When I came to France 2 years ago and did Paris, and I did like a whole week. I was by myself, it was my 50th, did a whole week of baking workshops because I've always been infatuated with French pastries because it's like a work of art and I'm got that artistic side. I couldn't explain then how I felt about being in France, and all my friends were like, oh my God, we can see it in your face. And I'm like, I got to come back. I'm so glad that I did it. And I don't regret it. I don't regret leaving anything. I know that the business hasn't been making any money, but I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll deal with that when I get back. And I just felt like if I wasn't supposed to be here, I wouldn't have been here. So there's some reason why, and I'm telling you, like, I usually can't even explain into words how I feel my happiest when I am here.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I initially moved to Mexico 4 years ago, and really it wasn't necessarily on purpose. I had been living in Honduras. The school I worked at had some financial issues. They had to restructure. I didn't like the new structure and was like, y'all need to let me out my contract. I didn't want to go back to the US. Ended up here. There was just something about Mexico City specifically.
Okay.
Like, I still can't explain it other than.
People don't understand that. You can't even put it into words.
No, because it's just like, when I get here, like when I'm on a plane and it's approaching, I can exhale. This is there. I guess this is my happy place. So no, I get that. And I left. I was here for a year and I left because I was like, I need to go back to work. Ended up living in Asia for about 2 years. And I know people got tired of me because the whole time I'd be like, well, in Mexico City, blah, blah, blah. And so the pandemic came. I got stuck in China for a little bit. And when I finally got out, I came straight here and people were like, okay, so how long do you think you're going to be there? And I was like, there is no other place I really want to be. And I can't, and for me, that was a huge thing to say, because for so much of my life, I wanted to be everywhere else other than where I was. Because, I didn't know it at the time, but that was unhappiness. But that, like, I really can't think of some place I would rather be. So no, I get it. I get it.
I am like totally like, I am like, I can't see myself going back and doing the same thing that I was doing before I left.
Not when you had that kind of happiness.
I can't even picture it. Like, I don't think about it because I'm like, I'm not trying to be bummed out yet. But like when someone asked me the other day, was there anything that I missed about the United States? I said, in all honesty, no. I said, if I really could stay now and just not come back, I would. But I know there's some things. I do have a son. I have, I have a granddaughter, and then one was born while I was here. And even people are like, well, what are you going to do about your son? I'm like, and what about him? He's friggin' 27. He's living his damn life. What the hell? He ain't thinking about my ass. So I'm going to bring me here and I'm going to do me. And then you know what? That'll open up a whole nother world for my granddaughters, because then now they can be global. They're already going to be bilingual. I'm like, okay, now they're going to be multilingual, because then I'll be able to teach them French. They can spend summers, in France, and they can be more worldly. And I think people just have to stop being afraid. And the other thing, I had this conversation with, there are 2 other ladies here visiting, and we're kind of traveling together in July. Here's the other thing. Besides the propaganda that US puts on the media about stuff in the US, the propaganda that they have programmed us to believe that every other country except the United States is dangerous, that every time I go somewhere, I know I shouldn't get annoyed. My friends are like, be safe, be safe. Like the other day I had to say, thank you all for your concern in me being safe. However, you don't have to tell me that, because I'm not worried about being out on the street late at night and someone robbing me at gunpoint, raping me, stabbing me, trying to kill me,
at the grocery store.
Me. Thank you. I said, yeah, a little petty theft. Who the hell cares? Let's see. You all need to be safe, because when you walk out your door, you have no damn idea what's going on. And that's in the United States. So thank you, but please stop telling me to be safe, because I feel safer here, over here, than I do when I'm in the US. And I hate to say that, but it's the truth. The truth is the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is. I'm thinking about what you said about people projecting their fears.
Yeah.
And that sticks with me. I find that really fascinating, because I don't believe that I'm someone that did that. Now, I will ask questions about, like, to make sure that you've done your research. But, if you're a grown ass person, I'm going to let you do what you're going to do. But this idea of projecting how I feel on someone else, I don't know. There's just something about that I think that's the root of, because I just did the episode, what is this? the podcast episode that's up now is literally on fear.
Oh, I'm gonna have to listen to that. Yeah.
Because I just see that as such a barrier to happiness. And like you just said, so much of the fear people are walking around with really has no true basis for it. It is because of propaganda in the news, because somebody else projecting their fear onto them. So I think anything that goes with fear, I'm just like extra like about, because it is the thief of so many people's happiness.
Yeah. And I think, and the other thing too is, I think that a lot of people want to know. So in all honesty, when I decided to do this, I've always been someone that's kind of done what I wanted to do. Okay. So when I decided I was going to do this, I didn't ask permission from anybody. I really didn't give a rat's ass who thought it was a good idea or not. And when I decided to do this, honestly, I did not think it was a big deal. Like, I really didn't think it was a big deal. And then the sooner that I got to my departure, the more I had, whether it was customers that I knew well or didn't know well, or friends or people that were saying to me, like within that week, they were like, oh my God, do you understand that what you're doing is what so many people may want to do, but they're afraid to do, or they can't do? And I'm like, what are you and when I literally say that week, that same thing was said to me over and over and over again. That made me start to think, well, maybe it is a big deal, but I never looked at it as a big deal. They're like, well, do you know anybody over there? No. Well, do you speak the language? Well, I'm learning it. But my whole thing is I wanted to change anyway. I was like, you know what? I need something different. I need something new. And for me, the thought, it wasn't even a second thought for me coming over here, not knowing anybody, not knowing the language. I'm like, you know what? I'll meet some people, which I did, and I will start learning the language, which I did on my little apps. And then I'm going to, learn it formally while I'm here. I didn't think anything of it. And so I think for a lot of people, especially the minority community, which you can't really blame, is they want to have some knows. They want to know some certain things. And that's just culturally how the United States has treated and dealt with us, that they want to be sure or have some stability. That whole not knowing and being uncomfortable and the fear. Where
there's the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Right. But you have that, the comfortable, whatever, but you're not happy. Whereas, if you are, I read something somewhere that said, if you are comfortable, that you will not experience true happiness, that you have to become, once you start getting comfortable, you need to become uncomfortable again, because it's a continuing journey for you to see what it really takes for you to be unhappy. And like, it's just like growing. Do you just want to like not continue to grow?
Well, think about American culture doesn't really teach you to pursue happiness. It teaches you to pursue comfort.
Yeah.
You need these things to be comfortable. You need these things so that you're secure, so that you're comfortable. It's never, American culture as a whole is not about happiness. It is really about comfort. And there was something you said, like how in that week up to your departure, you started to figure out that what you were doing was kind of a big deal. It shouldn't be. It should not be. And what does that say about the greater system of culture, that someone pursuing something that is of interest to them, what does it say about the greater culture that is such a big deal? It really should make us all step back and question the ideals that we have been fed, that we live with, if what you were doing is such a big deal, because it should not have been.
Right. I mean, and again, and I think now more than ever, people like you, people like me, who have stepped out of that comfort box or the traditional and living abroad can bring more introspective and bring more knowledge, real knowledge to our, to our community so that they know that propaganda you're being fed by the US, that other countries are more dangerous than us, and that, you can't live, or, what's the benefit to living somewhere else. I think that there are more now than ever before people that are out here doing this, that like what you're doing, you are actually providing a platform that people can see. And a lot of times for us, we won't do something until we see other people doing it, because you either don't want to be the first, or because you just don't want to be the first one, because you don't want to be uncomfortable. So for them to see this can be done, even if you have a family, the educational system in France, oh my God, your kids can go to college for little or nothing and end up knowing this is what's bothered me. I have learned that anybody that is from another country, they know a minimum of probably 3 languages.
And then here come the Americans, and we know one. No, I took my first formal Spanish class I took when I first moved here at the university. And as I looked around, it hit me. I am the only person in this room who only speaks one language. Right. There were Chinese, there were Koreans, Swedish, Nigerian, German, and I am literally the only person in here that can only speak one language.
Yeah. I was annoyed by it. I was annoyed by it too, because I remember when I was young, I always wanted to be multilingual. And even though Belize is in Central America, the national language was not English. And so my father was fluent in Spanish, but back then, old school, they were more trying to assimilate. So we did not grow up in the household speaking Spanish. So I took high school, a couple of years of college. Of course, at that time, you don't realize how important it would for me to really be fluent in it. And, just as I got older, I'm like, dang it, I so wish, and now I embrace, it's harder now, but I don't care. I want to know more than one language, and I'm trying to pick up on my Spanish, and I'm definitely learning French because I plan on living there. So I envy people. Everybody that was in this program, I was older than everybody in the entire program. I was older than my chef. And every young person was between 19, on an average, 19 to 25 from different countries. Only the Americans did not know more than one language. Everybody else knew about 3 languages, their language from their home country. If they had 2 parents from 2 different countries, then they knew 2. Then they knew English. And depending on what country they're from, my Spanish would probably get better once I moved to France, because if I'm going to be coming to Barcelona, you're going to want to know the language of the neighboring country. You see? So, I mean, there's, to me, I think so much more opportunity for people and children to be more global and worldly, not living in the United States, that people think, oh, well, I have kids. Kids can adjust.
They have kids everywhere.
Exactly.
But that's an example of how we've been indoctrinated in the US. People will be like, ooh, but did you go to the hospital? Yes, they have hospitals everywhere. They have doctors everywhere. Just because something is in the US doesn't make it better. And I am by no means saying everybody needs to leave the US. No, that is not what I'm about. I have said this repeatedly. I am about Black women living life on their terms, whatever that happens to look like. Exactly. So if your happiness is being in the US, be fearless there. For me, it was not.
Yeah.
It could not be.
And for me, it is not. So I am moving in the direction that you have already moved in being where it is I feel the happiest.
And that's what I want for everyone. Because I do see some of that and especially with the pandemic, and really the pandemic hit at a time with the height of the violence, the state-sanctioned violence against Black folks in the United States. So those things combined with a Trump presidency did everything to increase the numbers of Black Americans who started to look beyond the borders. And you get some people in those spaces who are like, everybody needs to leave. No, everybody needs to do what's right for them.
For them.
And be free and be comfortable enough to make those choices. What's right for you and I may not be right for somebody else, but I want them to know there are options. There are people out here who look like we do, who are doing this and living this life. Because I think about, had I seen someone like me doing this or just doing anything contrary to, you know, what society, maybe things would have been different.
Yeah.
So they always talk about, you know, be who you needed when you were younger. So that's what I'm trying to do out here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying to just also, like you, when I talk to young people and I said, you guys have a lot more opportunities and you know more now because of social media and everything than we do. And I always tell anybody that I know that you need to be more global. You do not need to confine yourself to just being in the United States. If you're young and you don't have any responsibilities, travel the world, learn. If you can't really be too empathetic if you don't know about other cultures.
That is the thing. And that is, I think, what we saw in this last year and a half of the pandemic. Empathy is not a strong American value. You can't, you're right, you can't really have empathy if you've not been around other people, if you've not been to other places.
Yeah. So, you know, it's a hard sell, but I think, and it's not that we're selling it or you're selling it, but I think from what I've seen in some of the groups that I'm in, I see more people are becoming more open to it now because of their frustration of their unhappiness where they are. And some people, like you said, the happiness could be there. If checking off the checkbox is truly not a superficial image happiness, which plays a lot also in the image of happiness. If it is your true happiness that you've checked off these check boxes, so be it. I'm not judging you for it. I'm not saying anything negative about it. All I'm saying is, and all I say to people is, you need to really, not in a superficial way, you need to really delve into yourself and think, I don't care what stupid little thing you think may be, if that's what makes you happy, and that's what makes you happy, and you need to own it.
Yes.
No matter what anybody else says, you need to own your own definition of happiness and success. I know and the United States is very materialistic because people would always say to me, oh, do you have a storefront? I'm like, why do you think having a storefront is the definition of my company being successful? Had I listened to those people, I would have been screwed during COVID. So my definition of being successful with my business is not having a storefront. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you get caught up into kind of wondering, well, maybe. And at one point I did, and I was like, no, that's not what I want. It's not who I am. And no, I don't want a storefront. And I started telling people, well, what makes you think that that's the definition of success, at least for me?
Because that's what they've been fed. So then they go forth and then they repeat that and perpetuate that idea instead of just saying, hey, she's doing the business that she wants to do. She's making money.
And how I want to do it. You know how many times, are you going to go on Shark Tank? No, because I don't want anybody else giving me their definition of what should be my happiness for success. Again, you're asking me to give that up to someone else. Not doing it.
But that's the same mentality of when a couple gets married. Okay, so y'all got married when you having a baby. Okay, you had the first one, when are you having the second one? And it's like, maybe those are not the choices they want to make in their life, but nobody's thinking it. And it's almost an automatic thing.
Yeah.
And it's straight from that culture. So of course, like, why wouldn't you? Of course you would want a storefront, because that's what you do. That's supposed to be the goal.
That's the epitome of success, that you have a storefront. No.
And then you get one storefront and they'll ask, well, okay, when are you going to expand?
Right.
Instead of, and I think I want to say that is something uniquely American.
It is. I think it is.
That you're just supposed to you're never really supposed to get to a place where you are happy and satisfied. Right. It's all about continuing to go, and
they make it like, it's unattainable unless you go to another level or whatever, which is one of the things that I always tell people when they ask me about being over here. I said, one of the things that I noticed very early on, I think I was one of those people that used to always just go to the Caribbean islands. My first Europe trip, I went to Morocco. And then I went to Japan because I got bit by the bug and I started doing some more traveling in different areas, not the Caribbean. And don't knock me. I love my Caribbeans. My goal has always been to hit every Caribbean island I can to visit. But I even thought about going back to my home country, Belize. And I'm like, no, I'll be bored. I'm not going to be happy there. I don't want to do it. But it's just hard to get folks to be unprogrammed from what has just been pounced in their heads over and over and over. And I tell people, one of the things that made me start to really realize happiness, and part of it is that whenever I came to Europe, they lived their lives differently because, and this is the saying, and I truly believe it, they work to live. They don't live to work. And the number of hours that, like, I'm gonna give you a prime example. 2 nights ago, did a paella class. There was a couple from DC. He was Jamaican and she was American, and they lived, and she happened to be a lawyer. And she was just turned 40. Now that we're talking, she just turned 40. Because I spit some stuff to her that her husband was like, And I was talking to her, and she was talking about feeling guilty about being here for 2 weeks. I said, why should you feel guilty? I said, see, that's the problem with the United States. You feel guilty when I already know. You work for the US government. I know the hours you put in. They're ungrateful. It's stressful. I said, you should not. I said, France shuts down in August for a whole month. You got lunch, you better take your lunch, because they take their lunch from 12 to 2, honey, because I would come up from school and be like, damn it, the store is closed. Now, I said, they do not. They sit at restaurants and they enjoy the company. They're not rushing to eat. And when I first got here, I had to remember not to rush. The quality of life is so much better because they do not live to do 60, 70 hours a week in work and still have horrible health care. Okay. So if that means me moving, paying more in taxes, but I'm going to have better health care, frigate, I'm going to take that trade-off.
I have no problem paying those kinds of tax rates if I don't have to live with the shadow of becoming ill or it ruining me financially. And a lot of Americans don't realize that is how precarious their situation is. I don't know why they don't. I think they don't want to believe it, but unless you are incredibly wealthy in the United States, you are one catastrophic illness away from financial ruin.
Absolutely.
And I just felt like I should not have to live like this. Nope. So yes, they pay a lot more in taxes, but they can see what they're getting for their tax money.
They can, the healthcare, the educational system, like I said, it to me, and I don't want anybody to think she's nuts. for me, I honestly say to people, depending on what you're going into, the amount of money it costs to go to college, you're not getting a return on that investment whatsoever.
I don't know why any young person would, unless they have parents who are going to cash flow it. I don't know why any young person goes to college in the United States, not when there are as many programs as there are in English. But again, they've been told, well, my degree won't be as No, baby, nobody cares where your bachelor's degree is from. Once they see your transcript, they see the kind of classes you took, you lived abroad, you probably learned another language, you got a foot up on everybody. Exactly. And it was either free or cost peanuts and ice water.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you know that I already have planned in my mind, when my granddaughter gets to that age, I'm going to push for that.
My youngest.
If I'm still living over here, which I hope that I will be, I will push for them to let her come abroad. She doesn't even have to come to France, but just go to school abroad. I mean, it is it's so worth it for several reasons, like you just said, besides the money. But we don't think that way. No. We don't think that way. And a lot of it, I will have to say, is because a lot of our people in the US don't know. Like you expose them to it and tell them about it, and they can now rethink, well, you know what, that might not be a bad idea.
My youngest was supposed to go to school in Germany, but she didn't get her grades together because I was like, they're not going to accept you with bad grades. Right. You got to give them some incentive. But,
right. Yeah.
But, especially in this last year and a half, watching folks talk about the amount of student debt they have and, the things they can't do because of that student debt. And I'm like, you can go get your degree possibly in 3 years abroad and not incur any of that.
And learn another language.
Why wouldn't you?
And not only that, but the global connections that you will make for whatever it is you want to do. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, those were three pros right there. And okay, what was the pros that I can think of for the US? Not being funny, but
because a lot of the work I do is, financially related. And I think student loan debt is the biggest scam ever.
Oh my God, it is.
And I want Black folks, Black women specifically, to avoid it at all costs. I didn't have student loans because I didn't know how to get them. So I missed that.
Well, this is great because I got them. And unless I find me a millionaire, billionaire, rich husband, they ain't never going to get paid off. And I've been out of school a long time.
Well, and that's just it. I didn't realize how big of a thing it was until when the Obamas mentioned they had just paid off their student loans. I was like, hold up.
Yes, Hunty. Yes.
And I was like,
they just need to forgive all that crap, to be honest.
And I just, because I want women to get their money right. So, because let's be real, money is what allows you the freedom to find your happiness. And I see student loan debt being the biggest scam and one of the biggest hurdles to that, because they feel like I've borrowed this money and I have to. So, yeah.
I'm going to put a roof over my head before I pay some student loan monthly, which usually is about more than a mortgage, depending on what you took out. So I'm like, whatever. The United States ain't give me nothing. So I'm going to take my pretty time, like I said. Unless I find me a billionaire husband, they will never. It's going to go with me when I'm gone.
And that's okay. I'm all about, because I'm also in a bunch of financial independence groups. And a lot of these women are in a situation where they can pay down their loans. They make way more money than I did as a public school teacher. If you're making 170 grand, 200 grand, I can see why I can see how paying back your loans is a real possibility. But there are a lot of folks that it is literally between either they never see this student loan money or I never get to have a life. I'm always going to tell you to choose to live.
Exactly. It absolutely positively. And I will tell the same, I would say the same thing. So it's like, whatever. But yeah, I think it's just, I think more Black women now, because they see more of us doing this, I think they're now more open to listening and at least learning about, for those that may want to either go visit. And, like you said earlier, you have to find your happy place. You have to go and like you couldn't describe it. I couldn't describe it. You'll know where it is. If you go, it'll hit you. It'll be the vibe. It'll be, you can't put it into words. It'll be the spirit, whatever you want to call it. But you have to at least venture out.
You'll never find it if you don't go out.
Yeah. And how do you not explore, at least explore to try to see if it's somewhere else? And then later on, when you can't, you're like, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. I don't believe in shoulda, woulda, coulda.
No. My brand, Picky Girl Travels the World. My mantra is, defy convention, embrace adventure, and regret nothing.
Great mantra.
That is how I strive to live my life. That is what I want for other Black women.
Yeah. Great friggin' mantra. And with that being said, I had one regret. No matter what I went through with my marriage, I never regretted it. I got my son, but there was one regret that I had. And it wasn't even when I was married. When I was at Spelman, I wanted to come to Spain for 6 months or for like a year to go to school. I'm young and I'm dumb. I'm like, oh, if I leave him, he gonna cheat. I didn't do it because of that. And even though I'm here, but it was more about going abroad. That's the one regret I feel, that when I came to France and I did my program for what I did, that regret of going abroad and going to school or somewhere is no longer there. So I no longer have any regrets in my life.
I love it.
None.
I love it.
There's none. Nothing that I have done, because it's all led me to here. Good, bad, and ugly.
And that's ultimately the message. Like you said it even before, there is no such thing as it's too late, you are too old. If you are in a space right now where you can do something about the thing that you wanted, because you could have easily said, I've got my business, I've got my son, I got my grandchild, but instead you chose to right that wrong, to remove that regret. I love that. I love that. Yeah. Now, if somebody wants to follow your adventures, where should they do that?
The main place they should follow my adventures would be on Instagram, because I'm on there daily. Delights by Dawn is the name of my company. Everything is through the company. So you see everything that I have made. Right now, since I'm not baking, which is killing me, I'm kind of like on this sweets quest through Europe. So I'm going to try to find the sweets that are indicative of where I am and kind of do recon. So Instagram. I also have a Facebook page that I'm very active on. And since I've been here, I actually started my YouTube channel. So what I'm doing is I'm uploading lengthier videos on things that I wouldn't put on the business page because, it's shorter in time. So so if people can follow me in any of those three, YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. So daily I'm on 2 out of the 3. And I've been having internet issues, upload every Sunday. I try to upload a new video while I'm over here, something I've done or some place I've visited, so people can kind of feel, like they're virtually here and they can kind of see.
So what did you think of today's episode? Let me know. If you are watching this on YouTube, please feel free to leave a comment. If you are listening to this on a podcatcher, you can use the link in the description to leave me a voicemail, or you can DM me through any social media platform, Twitter, Picky Girl Travels the World, no I in girl, or on on Instagram and Facebook, Picky Girl Travels the World. Is there a topic that you'd like me to dive into here on the podcast? If so, please feel free to let me know that as well. Thanks as always for your continued support. Every time you like the podcast, you share it with somebody else, you leave a review, all of those things go a long way to raising kind of the profile of the show. So thank you for all of that. If you want to support the show in a financial way, you can use the link in the description to become a patron, or you can do financial support directly through buymeacoffee.com. Either way, that's fine. If you're like, hey girl, I ain't got no money for that, that's okay. Like and share the podcast with other Black women. Until next time.